Hello, college football fans. Welcome to episode 190 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, college football fans and Husker fans.
Hello, everybody. We are here to talk to you about college football by college football fans for college football fans. We're a father-son duo here to come and talk to you about the Nebraska Cornhuskers, as well as things going on in the wider world of college football. And today, we're going to be talking about some further updates in the world of Nebraska football. There's been more transfers. There's been more coaching changes. So the train has not stopped moving since we recorded last week. And there's also some cool volleyball news in the world of Nebraska sports. And then a few national news updates. And, of course, predicting the playoff games this weekend. You know, this is sort of unusual, right? Normally, at this time of year, we're just waiting for the bowl games to get going, but we've already got a major weekend of college football to look forward to.
Right. It really is going to be amazing. I mean, I am very much looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Especially since we will be hopefully together by then on Friday evening for a holiday gathering of the family. So we'll be able to watch those games together.
Yes, we should be able to do our next podcast in person, hopefully, to talk to you guys about the results of these games and talk about the rest of the bowl games and, of course, Nebraska's Pinstripe Bowl.
Right.
But we're going to stick with our tradition and open up a cold beverage here. I got myself one more Japanese Sapporo beer.
Your Sapporos. And I am going to go with my standby now that I'm in the wonderful region of Phoenix, Arizona, and in Mesa specifically, and my Four Peaks Kilt Lifter, my new favorite beer. So here we go. Cheers.
Cheers. Now, how new is new exactly? Because you've liked that beer for a long time, from my perspective.
Well, that's true. I mean, new as in, you know, I only get it when I'm down here, so I don't drink it all summer, right? So, and for the last few years, I've been going to Florida, so that wasn't available there. So it really is the first time in 3 years that I've been able to drink this with some regularity.
There you go.
And we've already been to the brewery a couple of times. It's wonderful.
Man, you are a super fan. All right,
I am.
So we'll kick things off with talking about some of the coaching changes at Nebraska. We talked about some of them last week, but there have been even more updates. Like last week, we put up in a bunch of speculation on who the defensive coordinator would be, you know, and what the main choices were and stuff. And then a few days later, it was announced that John Butler, who was stepping in as the interim defensive coordinator for the bowl game, was promoted to full defensive coordinator by Matt Rule. From what I saw, it did get some mixed reactions. Like, on the one hand, he does come with a good pedigree from the NFL, but more so as a assistant coach, not so much as a coordinator. So this is kind of a step up, a promotion from within. And there were some options that we potentially could have gone for from some other programs for more established defensive coordinators. But obviously, Matt likes John Butler. And thinks that he's, you know, the right man for the job. So he's going with that option, you know, also probably not one that will break the bank as much as maybe some of those other potential hires could have. So what's your overall evaluation of this hire?
Well, I think you hit on it a little bit. There were definitely some others. I think he probably, you know, tested the market a little bit to see what maybe some of those other target people, what their level of interest was, knowing that if he had likely gone in another direction, he was probably going to be losing, you know, Butler, you know, after the bowl game or something. And so I think there's always a little bit of balance that you have to do there. And then some of these guys might have been attractive options, but if they're not realistically interested in your job, right? They don't want to come to Nebraska for whatever reason. They don't think we have the right availability of players. They don't like Nebraska weather. You know, I mean, there's a countless number of reasons where their wife and children wouldn't want to go. You know, there's all kinds of reasons. So I think that Coach Rule likely tested the waters a little bit, understood the level of interest from some of the other folks. And I think he also had a whole season to watch Butler coach. And I know that he has voiced publicly now how much this is true and what kind of numbers you're talking about is never going to be known. But he did indicate that there were a number of players, both within his position group as well as just other defensive players, who came to Coach Rule saying, "Hey, now that we know Coach White has left, we'd love to have him as our defensive coordinator." They came in and gave him a vote of confidence. So I think all of that stuff collectively, as well as maybe what you said, where he probably comes a little cheaper than maybe somebody who was a 5 or 10 year established defensive coordinator. And then there's some other caveats here. Now that there's an unlimited number of coaches, I think Matt already understood or knew that he had a pretty decent chance of being able to get Snow, his old DC from his days at Baylor and Temple, and in the NFL at the Carolina Panthers, was also in the mix for a role within the coaching staff. So, Matt recognized that, hey, I'm going to have a lot of defensive eyes available here.
Right. Yes. And of course, it was also announced that Phil Snow is joining as an associate head coach, which I believe that role was being filled previously by the previous defensive coordinator. So he's kind of stepping into that role, but letting John Butler be the main defensive coordinator. Now, I honestly don't know, in this new world where there are so many coaches or whatever, what does an associate head coach actually do?
Well, typically in the past, an associate head coach was the guy that would basically do the head coaching duties, oversee things and stuff on any occasions when the head coach wasn't available, whether that was because of some unexpected emergency or something like that, or if it was something where, okay, I'm going to be traveling on the road doing some, recruiting, and so I need you to run practices and run the media communications and check in with all these various departments that are now part of the overall football program that didn't used to exist. I mean, you can't just let all those people run amok for 4 or 5 days while you're gone, right? So if Matt wanted to be involved in the recruiting, which he clearly does, he has demonstrated that he likes to do that, then you need somebody back at the ranch, so to speak, making sure that things continue to progress the way you want them to progress. Otherwise, you run the risk of the organization kind of slowing down. It's like when you're in the office and the boss is on vacation, productivity can often diminish, right? Because the urgency isn't quite there or whatever, right? So unless somebody is there who's ready to, ring the bell and hold people accountable and still put the expectation out there and be the eyes and the ears to make things move. And so I think that's still going to be a key component of the associate head coach role. And then just the confidence aspect, because of their long relationship, I think he's also going to be a guy that at least can be a great sounding board for a young defensive coordinator in Butler, so that if he needs to have some things bounced off, he's got Phil Snow there to help walk him through that and ask tough questions.
Right. Well, I have two thoughts. One is what you were just describing about the associate head coach. I can see how that would be necessary, especially in this world now where, the recruiting never stops, right, for these college coaches. So to have a backup for that, it would definitely be helpful. And secondly, what you're saying about, some of the players kind of putting in their vote of confidence for John Butler in this world where you can transfer, right? And we've seen firsthand how coaches or players that have loyalty to a particular coach may follow them, if they decide to leave the program or whatever. If Rule did go in a different direction and didn't keep John Butler around as the defensive coordinator, maybe there would be some players who are loyal to him who would leave, right? So there's almost like this, it's almost like an election, right? Like you have a base, and the players can actually kind of influence that to some degree.
Absolutely. Way more than they used to, because of that leverage that they now have and they now possess. But yes, well, and even in the case of players, even as we look at our own, portal departures as an example. It's not even so much that you're leaving to follow an assistant coach, because, for example, our defensive line coach left, and a ton of our defensive linemen left as a result, portaled. But most of them, in fact, none of them so far have officially announced that they're going to the place where he ended up, right? They left just because, hey, I want to, if I now no longer know who my defensive line coach is going to be, who my coach is going to be, then why don't I just go out and portal, and then I control my own destiny. I can test the market to see who else is interested in me, and I also have some possibility, depending on conversations and your sense of where you fit in the depth chart and such. You probably have a little bit of a feel for what Nebraska thinks of you. And we've already had some examples of that, where some guys have gone out, portaled, and visited, even with some other possibilities, and then decided to come back. And we've allowed some of them to come back. Now, I'm sure in some other cases, Coach Rule would say, no, that's okay. You walked away and we're good. We've got some other plans now. You're not part of our future. You know what I mean? And that's a risk you take. That's a risk that each one of these kids takes. So I think this whole dynamic is going to be a part of the whole coaching carousel from now on. And it's going to be fascinating to watch. I mean, I have some other thoughts about that we could get into later when we talk about our kids who have left through the portal.
Right. Now, I haven't seen any of John Butler's interviews he's given since he became the official defensive coordinator. What is your sense on what scheme he's going to go with? You think he's going to keep Tony White's 3-3-5, or is he going to be a more traditional 4-3 type of coach?
That's a great question. I don't think he's given any strong indications of that. I think he has indicated, much like Tony White's defense, yes, he was formerly a 3-3-5 guy, but he actually, his overall scheme included all kinds of different combinations, right? And I think John Butler's is going to be the same. It's going to be very multiple, right? But I think John Butler is going to have a stronger focus than Tony White did on stopping the run at the line of scrimmage, as opposed to stopping the run through, the use of fitting gaps with linebackers, and scheming a good run defense, right? Which Tony White tended to do, and so that's why oftentimes we would be pretty good against the run, but then there would be games where there would, and you could call them outliers, but there would be a game or two, which we've seen both seasons, where his scheme didn't work very well, right? The other team just had a good answer, whatever it might have been. And so I think Butler's going to be more of, I want that to happen at the line of scrimmage, meaning the defensive lineman.
Right. Yep. And then there's other coaching news. We got it's been announced that the coach from UCF, their defensive coordinator Addison Williams, will be coming to Nebraska as a defensive backs coach, and the assistant defensive line coach at the Kansas City Chiefs, Terry Braden, is going to be coming to Nebraska to coach our defensive line. So there are two interesting gets there.
Yeah. Well, and I don't really know much about Addison, the guy that from UCF, other than to know that he was actually the defensive coordinator and the associate head coach at UCF last year. Which is a Big 12 school. So for him to move to the Nebraska program speaks to, I think, the job that Matt Rule has done to present that the Nebraska opportunity is a good one, and recognizing also that UCF was going through a coaching change, so his future at UCF was certainly not secure, right? He might very well have been asked to stay on. Who knows? But now that Scott Frost has been named the coach there, Scott may have wanted to go in an entirely different direction. So this guy would have been out of a job anyway. So with that in mind, I don't want to overplay that. Oh wow, we got this defensive coordinator who's willing to come to us. But just know that, he's got history. Uh, so he knows what it means to coordinate an entire defense and not just be responsible for one group. Now he'll be able to do that. He's going to be able to focus, but will obviously be another voice in the room. And I'm hopeful that I understand that he's a very good recruiter, and that is also true of Braden from the Kansas City Chiefs. I understand that he's a dynamic guy, and they believe he's going to be a really good recruiter. And they all have both of those guys have ties to Florida. Lots of these new coaches that we're getting have ties to the Florida area, which I think might speak to some strategies that we might be employing in terms of targeting our future high school athletes, high school recruits. We're going to have a much stronger presence in Florida, if I were to guess.
Now, with all those coaching changes, plus the one we talked about last week, which is Dykeal Jones Jr. as the wide receivers coach, and obviously we have Dana Holgerson, yes, stepping in as the full-time OC. We already have a lot of coaching changes, from just this previous year. Now, I know you've talked in the past about your disappointment with our special teams coach, and you thought he might be on the chopping block, but given the amount of other changes we've had on the staff, do you think Rule may keep him around just to kind of maintain some stability, given all the other changes on the team?
I think that's certainly possible, but I also think it's also likely even that Coach Rule is going to hire maybe another coach to be an assistant special teams coach, and so that he is hedging his bet a little bit on how things go, right? Because I guarantee you he's not happy with how our special teams perform this year. And that's why we're going out in the portal to go get some guys who are potentially going to be able to impact that in a big way.
Yes.
And so he clearly knows it was deficient. Now, maybe he's blaming personnel rather than coaching. I don't know. I know he has long history with our current special teams coordinator, but at some point, at the end of the day, you still have to hold that guy accountable to some degree. And I think he's going to do that most likely by putting some additional coaching assistants around him to give him more help, so to speak, right? And that guy then will have the choice. Am I offended by that, or feel like I'm being shoved into a corner and so I'm going to go find a new pasture myself? Or am I okay with that because I do appreciate the help and I'm willing to stay the course here and stay in Lincoln and continue to work for my head coach, Matt Rule. And I think that's true for Satterfield as well, tight ends, right? I mean, right now, everything appears good that he's going to stay on as our tight ends coach. Yeah, we'll see. So I think there might be some other changes that are still in the future.
Right. Hopefully they wait until after the bowl game this time, though.
That's right. That's my point. Is I think those two guys might have some dynamics change around them after the bowl game.
Right. Well, and you mentioned it earlier, so we'll talk about it now. In terms of the commits and transfers that came into the program in the past week, one of them was a long snapper named Kevin Galick. So there's somebody specifically to help with the special teams department, which is good to see. We also got an interesting transfer from Missouri, a defensive edge player named Williams Niveneri, kind of an odd name, and he's a freshman player. And then we also got a commit from a linebacker named Vincent Shavers, and it was announced that defensive lineman Keona Davis, who had previously gone into the transfer portal, has decided to stay with Nebraska.
Well, Vincent Shavers was on our team already, and he just basically, now the players that are choosing not to go to the portal and are staying, need to hedge off rumors that they're leaving by making a post that says, I'm 100% in.
Okay.
For Nebraska. And so Shavers is an example of one of the players, and a number of them have done this now, where they've come out. Dylan Raiola did the same thing, where he was compelled because there was all these rumors about him portaling, right? That he was going to portal. And so he came out and said, no, I'm 100% in. I'm ready for next year. So
Right.
So, I mean, that's the crazy thing now is any of the hundreds of people who have podcasts like us or are traditional media members or, are radio personalities or whatever, any one of those people, as well as national folks, can go out there and throw out a speculation, has no basis in reality other than he heard it from somebody that he semi trusts. So then he just repeats it on air or in a podcast that so and so is considering leaving, and it blows up because that's social media, right? So then the player is compelled to squash that rumor,
Right.
and say, no, I'm all in.
Right. But in terms of the two new addition, Williams and Kevin, do you have anything to mention about them?
Well, the guy from Missouri, William with the tough last name, was a 5-star player last year coming out of high school. We were in on his recruiting quite extensively, but lost to Missouri. And most speculated at that time that we lost out primarily because we didn't have quite as big of a bag of money. It was big of a NIL offer as Missouri was willing to provide. And so we kind of fell back in the competition, so to speak. But then, they paid him all this money for a freshman year in which he played a little bit, but not much. And now they have a running back that we also were in on last year that ended up committing to Missouri, who is also now in the portal and is considering Nebraska among many others. But they paid him a huge bag of money and for 23 carries and 104 yards. Lacey is his last name, and so these are just examples of what this crazy system is that we now have, where these kids, because they are not signing contracts like an NFL football player does, where they now sign a contract that commits them to 2 or 3 years or 4 years of a contract. They're not committed to anything, and so if you give them a bunch of money up front, you're just blowing money. You're wasting that money, especially on a freshman that has a high probability that they're not going to be ready to give you massive contribution right away. You know,
Right.
so I think all these schools are going to be reconsidering how they do all this stuff going forward.
Right. Though admittedly, right, with some of these, reported contracts, that I've seen about these players, it'll be a eye-watering sum of money, but it'll be distributed over the course of, your 4 years, 5 years that you're at the program, right? It's not like you're getting it all up front.
However,
but are you saying that some schools are kind of like adding in like a bonus or like a little bit extra up front to kind of entice kids with
yes,
extra money now?
I'm sure that's happening, but here's the thing: even if you divide it by 4, for example, Alex, uh, the reality is in a traditional professional contract at a professional football team, for example, you know, if you were to break that contract before it ended, you not only would you not get paid the rest of your contract, but you might be held accountable for some of the money you were given. Like you say, in an NFL scenario, if I have a contract for $10 million, but 5 of that $10 million was a signing bonus, and then I was going to be paid $1 million a year for 5 years, right? And then I choose to leave after 2 years. Well, then they're going to retroactively say, well, you only did 2/5 of the contract, so you have to pay back 3/5 of the bonus that we gave you up front, right?
Right.
So, I mean, there's all kinds of things like that go on in how those contracts are to hold them to the obligation, right? So none of that exists in any of this NIL money, and now with this revenue sharing thing that's going to happen, okay, once all those details get finalized, although some of the numbers are already been kind of established and stuff, schools are going to have more money at their disposal, where the NIL will become a smaller portion of the overall compensation that a player might be getting, except for the really, really, really top end guys. Okay, those will be the only ones where that won't be the case.
Right.
And
And
so that's going to change this thing too.
right. But with that revenue sharing, will that be more official? Will that actually be a contract?
I sure as heck hope it will. But I don't think that any of that contract is going to probably be allowed by regulation to hold them accountable if they leave. Meaning they're not going to be able to be charged. Hey, you have to give it back, right? Where in the NFL world there is that. I don't think that will be the case. But I don't think that those kinds of compensations, that revenue sharing, will be a very structured. There won't be any bonus or upfront heavily laden stuff. It's going to be this much per month, and as soon as you leave the portal or leave to go into the portal, boom, it stops. Right, it's done.
Right.
And but here's the thing: if you entice, like Missouri went crazy last year and spent a lot of money, got a great recruiting class, had a bunch of talent, and it looks like 3 or 4 or 5 of them are leaving. So they wisely, if you want to call it that, went and got the biggest bag of money they could as freshmen, and then evaluated that program for a year. And if it didn't look good, or they didn't think they were being, utilized in the proper manner, they leave. But they've already got a big chunk of money, right? And then they go out in the portal and do it again. That's what Dowdell's doing. I mean, he started at Oregon. He transferred after his freshman year to Nebraska. Now he's going to transfer out of Nebraska to go somewhere else.
Right.
So,
well, speaking of which, you spoiled it there, Dad.
Sorry.
But no, it's fine. In terms of the people who are, leaving the program, going into the transfer portal, there are a few more names added in the past week, including Nate Borkacher, Jacob Hood, Kobe Bretz, Isaiah McMorris, AJ Rollins, and then most recently, and surprisingly perhaps, Dante Dowdell. Dante is the one that definitely surprises me because, he was like our main running back this whole year. So he's certainly got plenty of playing time. My thought is that he might be doing what Emmett did, where he'll dip his toe in the portal, kind of see what interest there may be. And then he'll, come back to Nebraska with the knowledge that we'll likely take him back because he is an important player for us. But sounds like you think he might just be looking to take his wares to a higher bidder. Is that your thinking?
That's my thinking. That's what he thinks he's going to do, right? And he might very well be successful because, but now anybody who's watched, because he didn't have very many carries in his freshman year at Oregon because he was a freshman coming in and a team that had a lot of talent, right? So he was fairly buried on the depth chart there. He came to Nebraska and he was the feature back for probably 10 of our 12 games this year, right? And but those 2 games where he wasn't at the end of the year, where after a new coordinator had come in, put the writing on the wall that, hey, I need a guy that can do more than just run straight ahead. And Dowdell and his film pretty much indicates to anybody who wants to evaluate him that he's a guy that maybe doesn't have the lateral ability and the vision that you might want in a great running back. So he's got some lessons that need to be learned. Now, he might still develop those skills. He might still, become a much better running back if he stayed the course, but he's choosing to go outside and try again with another new start. And every time you do a new start, it's disruptive, man. Your development gets disconnected by doing that. And he doesn't understand he's hurting himself. And I'm fairly confident, actually, Alex, that Nebraska will not, pursue him in the portal like they did Emmett Johnson. Emmett was a guy that I think our coaching staff really valued. Now, I'm sure they'll ask Dante, hey, we would really love to have you. And, we're willing to do whatever, which is probably what we've already given you. We would continue to give you. But if he walks away based on his performance this year, he's an incomplete back. I think the Nebraska coaching staff might look at it and say, we can do better. We can probably go into the portal and find somebody that fits our offense better than he does.
I understand his shortcomings, and I obviously did notice at the end of the year how he played less as Dana Holgerson kind of came in and made his own decisions. But I certainly think there's still a role for Dante in the team, in
Absolutely.
certain yardage situations, or if he, God forbid, practices in the off season and improves the areas where he's lacking. If he got better vision or better feet, then he would be a great back.
Absolutely. Totally agree. But you know what? You can't go chase every one of these guys. And keep in mind, at the end of the day, Coach Rule knows he still needs to get rid of probably 40 guys because he's probably going to sign another eight or, we've signed 2 guys. We're probably going to sign another 8 to 12 guys, right? So additional new portal guys that are specifically targeted to our needs. So that just changes our needs in the running back room. Maybe we go out and get another running back like this Ives from Missouri. I mean, that's a guy we invested a lot in terms of the recruiting process last year, and then lost at the finish line. So maybe that's a guy, not Ives. What am I saying? I can't remember his name, but my point is there are other backs in the portal now that you would look at and say, based on what I know about Dante, if I'm going to spend this much of my NIL and my revenue sharing dollars, I can go get that guy that I actually think fits Dana Holgerson's offensive needs more than Dante does. Now, but to make your point as well, Dante's the one who scored all of our running touchdowns, man. I don't think Emmett scored 1 touchdown, or if he did, it was only 1. Dante scored 12 touchdowns this year. Pretty
exactly.
Good.
Yeah.
But oftentimes he was hardly on the field between the 20s, and then he would get on the field when we got, inside the 15. And then he would end up being the guy that pushed us over and scored. Now, instead of embracing,
there were some games where it felt like we were running him, every other play, like he was our main back.
He absolutely was. I'm just saying that as the season progressed, his time diminished because we were recognizing that he wasn't the guy that could break the tackle. He wasn't the guy that could take the 15-yard run and make it into a 40-yard touchdown run, right? And once that wasn't happening with him, we gave other guys an opportunity to see what they could do. My feeling is I'm frustrated with him because I think he would have been a great 1-2 punch. There's no doubt he had value for us as a team, Alex, and we're really going to miss him in the bowl game.
Yeah,
huge,
definitely.
It's a huge loss. It's a huge loss. But I think he's an idiot who's making a big mistake.
And then the other name, of course, that stands out on that list is Nate Borkacher, another person who's had some starting time. What's your thought on that one?
Now, that one, I have a very different view. Okay. Nate recognized that, Nate came in as a walk-on, but worked hard. He has put himself into a position where he's got the physical strength and attributes that people are looking for. And he understood that he had value, right? And he spent his whole career behind Thomas Fedone, right? And was kind of always playing second or third fiddle. And we have some other tight ends that got shared playing time. And now Coach Rule has talked about moving Heinrich Harburg to tight end. So there's another guy. And then we have a true freshman, Carter Nelson, who was, everybody's favorite, right? And did really well in his limited role. And Carter is intended, supposedly, as being a tight end. So you look at the tight end room and he realizes he's got a little bit of an uphill battle to see time, but he's got great data. I mean, he's shown it on film, right? So he goes into the portal. He immediately gets attention from Alabama, LSU, Georgia, and I think Texas. All have expressed interest in him. So he did the right thing, right? It's pretty obvious now that he's got great interest. He's a guy that if we could convince him to come back, we would absolutely pursue him.
Right.
So that's the opposite of what I just said about Dante Dowdell.
Right.
And this is all just my opinion, but that's the weird thing of this whole portal dynamic.
Yeah. Well, and to your point though, if he's getting that much interest from those types of programs, I'm sure he's not coming back.
No, not necessarily. If I read the tea leaves, I think it's still a 50-50 thing. I mean, he is going to take some visits and we'll see. I mean, you don't know. See, if you're in his shoes, okay, so Alabama's, reaching out and having conversations with you, but where are you on their list? Really? Are you the backup of the backup target on the out of the portal for them, or are you the primary guy out of the portal for them? You don't know that. And so maybe you have to take a visit to Alabama and see if you can get a sense of where they really slot you. Where do you fit, right? And So it's not all clear, right? These people that are all praising you and kissing your, you know what, um, you don't know what their real intentions are.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Um, and then one other just news related to Nebraska football is that it was officially announced that Frank Solich has been inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. Of course, he's retired now as the Ohio University head coach and had a very successful career at Nebraska as well. So congratulations to Frank for that one.
Yes, I mean Frank was underappreciated, right? Number one, he was an all Big Eight, maybe Big Six. I don't even remember when he played, whether it was Big Six or Big Eight. That goes back a long time. Uh, he was an all conference fullback at like 145, 150 pounds.
Right.
Can you believe that? I mean, the guy was a stud. I mean, you watch film of him when he played, holy cow. I mean, he was a little bowling ball, man. He was hard to tackle and good blocker, tough as nails. And he was that way for his many years, 25 plus years with Coach Osborne at Nebraska as the running backs coach, and had a litany, a long list of All-Americans and draft picks and things like that. I mean, the running back history, uh, Mike Rozier, Lawrence Phillips. I mean, you name the players. Ken Clark, Isaiah Moses, I am hip. Roger Craig, um, Tommy Rathman, my old Grand Island friend. All those guys, right? Just tons of them. So the guy was amazing as an assistant coach, and he before Nebraska, he was a high school coach of some acclaim, right? So he was just good at everything. He was the freshman coach at Nebraska back when we had a freshman team, very successful. So, and then of course after he left Nebraska, he went on to great success at Ohio U, which is what that's the collection of all that got him into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, so that was a nice feel good story to read this week amidst all the transfers and all that.
Right, absolutely.
And then the other piece of good news for Nebraska fans was, of course, in the volleyball world. We talked last week about some of their upcoming games. So they did end up beating Dayton 3-1, and then had to play against Wisconsin. Texas A&M put up a valiant effort against Wisconsin, brought them to a fifth set, but lost. So we had to play them for the third time this year, and you and I both watched that whole game. And we managed to beat them 3-0 yet again, bring our set total up to 9-0 over Wisconsin this year, which is pretty incredible. In particular, the second set, we went up into we had a pretty big lead of 9-10 points. At one point, it was a smaller spread by the time the game wrapped up, but we were really playing well there, just playing amazing defense. Lexi Rodriguez having an amazing game in this one.
Yes, absolutely. And it's one of those things where, honestly, after watching the first round of the Sweet 16 weekend, and when we played Dayton, we literally walked through that match, and a number of our players did not play well. The only one who really did were Lexi and Harper Murray, and you really had the sense that, well, maybe this is the end of the line for Nebraska, because you're just thinking, if they don't figure out some damn offense, they're going to get spanked by Wisconsin. Even though we had already beaten Wisconsin twice, you look at Wisconsin's talent and their offensive prowess, and then the recognition that they had some injuries earlier in the year that affected some of our previous matches with them. Now all of a sudden they were looking more healthy and they were playing way better defensively. Coach Cook, after this Wisconsin match in the Elite Eight, Um, he stated in his press conference afterwards that he felt that that was probably the toughest game that they have played. That the defense played by both teams was elite. Right? It's not like Wisconsin was way below us in terms of their effort and their performance defensively, and they were serving really tough. They were doing a lot of things at a very high level, and yet we still beat them 3-0, which is remarkable, and speaks to how great our defense was.
Right.
But most, including myself, I was fully prepared for Nebraska's volleyball season to come to an end. I did not have a great deal of confidence that we would be able to find a way to produce enough offense to beat a team with Wisconsin's talent.
All right. So I hope now that you have gone over your crippling anxiety and fear over Wisconsin volleyball, because you've said that before each of our 3 games, and we've beaten them 3-0 each time. So at what point are you convinced that we can do it?
Now, because now Sarah Franklin's gone. Anna Schreck, 6'9" Anna Schreck is gone. Oh God, what's her name? Robinson. Devin Robinson is gone. I mean, they lose some incredibly talented seniors. Julia Orzel from Poland is gone. I mean, these are very talented players that are all gone from Wisconsin. So next year, when we're facing them, even though they're going to have a tremendous amount of highly regarded young talent, I'm not going to view them in any close to what I viewed them, because they had some offensive advantages over us that we had no answer for. There's no answer for 6'9", Alex. There's no answer for that, right? And for the cut shot that Sarah Franklin has, where she's able to hit a ball from one side of the court to the other, literally 4 feet from the net. It's inhuman for a girl to do that, right? And she's gone, right? So I don't think there's a player that they can recruit or bring into the program that's going to be able to do what she did.
Right.
Now, I could be wrong, because we spent a lot of time here talking about collegiate football portaling. The portal aspect in the volleyball world is blowing up in a crazy way that I didn't really expect. I really thought that now that we're kind of out of the COVID extra years, that things would settle down, but the opposite has happened. The portaling in all the other sports other than football is exploding even more than football, or at least as much as football.
Yeah. Well,
so all of them are.
I'm not surprised by that, because most other sports have a smaller roster than football. So one player can have, more of an individual impact, generally speaking. And especially volleyball, right? You only have, 6 girls out there on the court at any one time.
Right.
So yeah, I can really see that being chaotic.
Oh yeah. It's frightening.
Yeah.
And so, it's certainly possible that Wisconsin, for example, or any team like them, could rebuild their roster through the portal over the next 3 or 4 months and put together a team that would intimidate me and make me think, oh gosh, we can't beat them. But I don't think so.
Right.
I think the magic of Wisconsin and their voodoo over Nebraska, it's gone, man. We beat their football team. We beat their baseball team all the time. We beat their basketball team last year. The curse of the Wisconsin thing is over.
There you go. Yeah, just 2 things I want to mention. I perused the Wisconsin sports Reddit and looked at the thread on the volleyball game, and they were basically saying, yeah, not too surprised. Nebraska's just better than us this year. One person said, I'll be happy that Lexi is gone after this, that we won't have to deal with her anymore. So it goes both ways on the senior talent.
It absolutely does.
And then secondly, I just want to highlight Harper Murray, who I know has had her struggles this season, especially mentally and things like that. But I'm happy to see she's really coming alive in this tournament. I know she had a lot of kills against Dayton, and then she also had a ton of kills against Wisconsin. Seems to be playing at a high level at the right time.
Absolutely, yeah. And her back row, her defense has become elite. Her ability to pass and dig as a middle back is really become phenomenal, and that's on a team that already had the best littles in the country, right? Collectively, with Lainey Choboy and Olivia Mock. I mean, we have a glutton of riches. We're just so blessed to have those guys. But now with Harper as well, it's phenomenal because we have somebody who can also attack out of the back row who has that kind of a talent. So it does make us a more challenging offense to defend because of her presence. She's done great.
Now, I know you were concerned about Texas being on the other side of the bracket from us. However, they actually played against Creighton, another team from Nebraska, and lost to them 3-1. So Creighton moved on to play against Penn State in their Elite Eight game. Creighton brought Penn State to a fifth set, but lost. So Penn State is going to be the opponent we have to play, the team that beat us during our regular season in the Big Ten. And on the other side of the field, you have Pitt and Louisville. So in this case, all of the 1 seeds made it to the Final Four.
It's really remarkable, Alex. This was probably one of the most competitive, well, not probably, this was the most competitive tournament I've ever witnessed in my years of following Nebraska volleyball and collegiate volleyball. But the 1 seed still emerged through it, but the number of those 1 seeds that had huge challenges, right? Teams that took them to 5 sets where they almost lost in the earlier rounds. And there were some upsets of some seeded teams in the early rounds that maybe allowed these 1 seeds to make it through. But the collective tournament was way more competitive than anything I've ever seen before.
Yeah. So I guess real quick, we'll mention Pitt versus Louisville. Obviously, Pitt is the number 1 ranked team in the country. And my expectation would be that they will probably win that one. Like you say, I think Louisville had a pretty tough road getting to where they are now in the tournament. But what's your prediction there?
Yes, I would agree with you. I think Pitt's talent is just superior to Louisville's. Now Louisville has the benefit of playing at home and with their home crowd, and as Nebraska demonstrated in the Wisconsin match, that's probably the loudest I've ever heard Devaney. So home court matters. Volleyball is a sport of momentum. So I would never want to rule Louisville out, but I'm fairly confident in my assessment that says Pitt's likely to win that game.
Right.
I would say maybe 3-1 or 3-0.
Okay. Yes. And then I think I agree with you there. In terms of our game against Penn State, obviously Penn State did beat us last time, but it was a 5-set match, and we did not play well in that game. We made a lot of mistakes. So if we can continue this momentum from this Wisconsin game, and I think the girls will be plenty motivated because of the fact that Penn State beat us before, I think if we play them the way we did against Wisconsin, we should win. I'll go ahead and predict that we do drop 1 set to them, but that we do win 3-1.
I would say that's probably a pretty good estimate or speculation. Prediction, I guess, is the right term. I agree. I mean, we lost to them, and I think we lost to them 3-1. I don't think we even got to 5.
That's right.
But
it was close, though. That's the point.
It was close. Exactly. We were playing with a bunch of things going on. So we did not play even remotely close to our best. And they had some players, specifically one of our former players who transferred, speaking of portaling, who transferred to Penn State away from Nebraska as a freshman because we redshirted her. And then she had the game of her early career. I mean, the best game of her career to this point was the Nebraska game. And so, and we had no answer for her. So I think we will be very motivated to have that answer when we face them this Thursday. And so I think you'll see a much better effort from Nebraska than you did last time. And that should translate to a Nebraska victory.
So what's your set prediction?
I would say 3-1 is a great number. Yep. Yep. I mean, we might do 3-0, but again, I'm going to say we'll drop a set because they're good. I mean, these it's not like they're not talented. So I'm going to say we win 3-1.
Right. All righty. And now transitioning to the national world of college football. In terms of games, there's only really one this past weekend, which is, of course, the traditional Army-Navy game. And Army went in as the favorite. They were the ranked team this year, whereas Navy hasn't done as well. And yet they ended up winning it pretty solidly, 31-13. I didn't end up watching that, but I saw the final result. So it just goes to show you, right, in those sorts of rivalry games, you can never really predict what's going to happen.
No, that is true. There have been some times when the reverse was true, where the Navy came in as the strong favorite, and only to have Army beat them. So yeah, that is there's an intensity to that rivalry that's probably undescribable, right, compared to anything else I've ever seen. And that's why you know I've talked with you about the fact that I would love someday for you and I to be able to go to that game, for you and
Yes.
I to be able to attend and enjoy the experience of that game.
It would be very
I
cool.
think it would be awesome.
Yeah. And then, of course, there was the Heisman this past weekend. Unsurprisingly, Travis Hunter won the Heisman. He was certainly the favorite coming out of Colorado, playing on both sides of the ball. But Boise State's running back, Ashton Gianti, was also up there and actually got quite a few votes to take the Heisman, although he didn't win. He got second place. But it was really a competition between those two.
Yeah, and I actually, yeah, I agree. I think it was probably a little closer than I thought it was going to be in terms of the actual voting. I thought it was clearly Hunter was going to get it because people were so enamored with his, uh, two-way play. Right. I have a picture I could send to you, Alex, that a couple of people tend to share every year, this time of year, as a reminder of effectively Hunter is the second defensive player uh, to
Right.
win the award, right? But the reality is he wasn't a defensive player; he was a two-way player. He played a lot of snaps on offense, and the other guy who won that award was Charles Woodson, who was a defensive back for Michigan, who also was a punt returner and played some wide receiver, much like
Uh,
Hunter did, right? So
right.
those are the two examples of defensive players that won the award. Otherwise, it's been an award that was dominated by offensive performance, all going back to the two-way when players played two ways, and that was a common thing in the early days of football. But I have to tell you that so there's a guy that sends out a little summary of what the Alabama defensive line, the Texas defensive line, and the Florida defensive line, which were the three best teams in the 2009 football season, and what their stats were for as a team, right?
Right.
And then the fourth one is Ndamukong Suh's personal line in that same year, and it'll blow you away. So the winner of the national championship of that year was Alabama. So I'll do those two. The others are very similar. Alabama, 98 tackles among their entire defensive line. And Ndamukong Suh, 82. Tackles for loss of the entire Alabama defensive line, 23.5. Suh, 23. Sacks, 9.5 sacks for Alabama's defensive line, 12 sacks for Ndamukong Suh. QB hurries, 20, 24 for Suh. Pass breakups, 5. Suh, 10. Interceptions, and Ndamukong Suh, he actually intercepted a ball and returned it for a touchdown. Okay. And then blocked kicks, Alabama, 3, and Ndamukong Suh, 3. He blocked 3 kicks. So there's the stats, and he did not win the Heisman. So this idea that a defensive player can win a Heisman is complete crock. They have to also play offense if they're going to be able to garner enough support among these voters to actually get that done. That's the biggest example of somebody who got screwed and should have been a Heisman Trophy winner.
Right.
There.
Well, yeah, those stats are incredible, and I didn't know that no pure defensive players ever won the Heisman. So that would have made
Well,
Sue's win even more
well,
impressive.
I wouldn't say no. There might be one that I'm forgetting. And then certainly there were a bunch of guys back in the day when it was two platoon football, and
Right.
most players played both ways. There were obviously all those Heisman's played both ways, but yeah, since in the more modern era of football, where it was one platoon football, yeah, having a defensive player win the
Right.
Heisman
Right.
was almost impossible.
But I will say, I think people look back on that 2009 Heisman and know that Sue should have won, especially looking at what the players did after that and everything like that. So
Right.
I like to think that opens up the possibility that if a defensive player had a career or a year on that level, like Sue did again, that they would actually get the nod this time. That's
Well,
my
I
hope.
sure hope so, and that's why you have to highlight that. And this guy does it every year. He annually puts out a tweet where he puts this little chart out and says, "This is my annual point to let you know about the Heisman Trophy."
Yeah.
I just thought that would be fun to restate.
Yeah. And then this was pretty big news. Bill Belichick, the famous pro coach from the NFL, is coming to North Carolina to be their new head coach at the collegiate level. He's getting paid a pretty penny to do so, which shouldn't be much of a surprise. But I think that's got to be pretty scary for everybody in that league.
Well, yeah, it's gonna be a fascinating experiment, right? He's 73 years old, Alex,
Right.
and we've just gone through all the minutia and detail of what a head coach like Matt Rule has to go through in this uncontrolled era where Matt Rule can have as many assistant coaches as he wants. He can also recruit as many players as he wants, as long as by the beginning of practice in the fall and August, he's down to 105. So he can play all kinds of games with, garnering a bunch of talent, maybe practicing with a bunch of guys in the spring, and then whittling it down and telling them, well, you're not going to be on the 105 roster. Sorry, you can go somewhere else. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are now available to you that are very very NFL footballish, right? And so, but the question is, does he have the energy to deal with all of that? And he's going to try this, NFL model that is no longer a new model. I mean, Matt Rule has a general manager. Most major football programs now have a general manager. So that has already happened. It's going to just be really fascinating to see how much he's going to be willing to put up with all of this stuff. He being Belichick, when the first time that he doesn't win, because you can't be the curmudgeon that he was in the NFL and get away with it,
Right.
right?
Well,
It's going to be a very different situation. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles that.
I was just curious, so I just looked at his Wikipedia page. He has spent his entire coaching career since 1975 in the NFL. To my knowledge, he
Yes.
has never coached at the college level at all. So this will be
Correct.
quite a culture shock to him.
And he called it a dream come true. Well, which is hilarious because I'm sure that he could have called any during his rise, and certainly during his period of success in the NFL, he could have chosen to pursue his dream at whatever school he wanted, and he could have called him and said, "Hey, I really desire to be a collegiate head coach. I'm done with the NFL game. Would you guys be willing to consider me?" And at any moment in time, any major program would have absolutely wrote the check and brought him in, right? I mean, that would have happened. They would have found major donors to fund it.
Right.
Now he's doing it here at the end of his career, and I don't question his X's and O's. I think he'll be fantastic. But again, even think about that, Alex. Now they're limited to 25 hours a week. That's how many hours they get, and that includes game day. That includes the game.
Right.
So it's really like 21 or 24, or I mean, excuse me, 21 or maybe even 20 that you actually get. Well, he's used to having an NFL thing where the NFL players show up at 7:30 and they leave at 5. So they're literally working 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. Well, you got to coach differently when you only have about 16, 17 hours of time to work with these guys, right? Because you've got to give them weight training time. You've got to give them time to meet with their psychologist and meet with the trainers and all the other stuff. And so when you do all that, I just question. He's going to have to simplify his systems and all the things that have made him a successful coach, and he's got to boil it down so that these young people can figure it out. It's going to be a fascinating experiment.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he won't succeed. The guy is the GOAT. He's the greatest coach of all time in the NFL, right? Like he's, I mean, people talk about Lombardi. Lombardi didn't do what this guy did, right? In terms of success,
Right.
he didn't. And so it's going to be fascinating to see.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that one for sure. And then, of course, there have been some just general stories in the national landscape about, the transfer portal, as that's swirling not only at Nebraska, but at all schools. So I'm just going to go through a couple of interesting headlines that have come out in the past week or so. It was announced that Marshall is actually opting out of the Independence Bowl because too many of their players transferred and they felt that they couldn't continue to play the game. They found a replacement school to step in for Marshall there. And as a contrast to that, it was reported, I saw on Twitter, that Ohio University, my alma mater, was the only school in all of the FBS to not have anyone in the transfer portal. Just a sign that as they're now MAC champions, they've got a good thing going there and good loyalty with those kids, along with the fact that there's probably, not too many crazy superstars at Ohio U that are looking to, transfer to Alabama or whatever. That certainly plays a part too.
And the thing is that could change. There could be a bunch of people portal. So that brings up a couple of things for me, Alex. One is, when you go into the portal, obviously has an impact on your value, right? Let's use Ohio University and Nebraska as a little bit of a comparison. Recall that last year Nebraska had very few players that portaled, right? We were one of the most stable teams in the Big Ten. Now, why was that? It was in part the great job that Matt Rule had sold about the vision for the program and where we were headed, and there were no roster limits in the future defined yet, so he could make his roster as big as he wanted it to be, right? And with the flexibility of basically putting people on an NIL scholarship, for lack of a better term, where they weren't really formally part of the 85 scholarship limit that existed, but they were still getting paid like a scholarship player, right? So there were things you could do to work around that system, and you could just try to fit your roster the way you wanted it. And that created this temporary peace, if you will, in the roster situation. Now, fast forward a year, and Nebraska is now faced with having to get rid of 40 guys because we now have to hit 105 roster, where we've been carrying 145 to 150 players all year, right? For an entire year. Well, by next August, that has to be down to 105. So all these people have to leave. And obviously, many of those will probably end up being walk-ons and things like that. But there's also going to be, quality athletes that are going to leave as well, because they're going to look at the numbers. They're going to look at where am I on the depth chart and all that sort of stuff. And now in the case of Ohio U, like you say, they maybe have some more limited prospects other than the top 8 or 10 guys on that entire team. None of the other guys probably have a huge value out in the free market unless they wanted to move from Ohio University to Miami of Ohio or to Bowling Green or somebody else of a comparable school, right? Those are the only choices they have. So it's going to be really fascinating to see how that all plays out. And now add on top of all of this variability, Alex, this new, House of Representatives settlement agreement that's going to influence the impact of collectives versus the payments of the shared revenue, because supposedly the house settlement um, requires payments above $600 to have fair market value, meaning they can't give some guy $500,000 in NIL payments to go to 3 meet and greet functions over the course of the year with big alumni or big boosters. That there has to be legitimate value comparison, right? They have to justify that fair market value, okay, for the advertising or the marketing. So they can't just throw a bunch of money at them and basically use NIL as a way to pay players. There actually has to be a true quid quo pro to the money. And so those are all things that are going to have a massive influence on how all this stuff ultimately plays out and how it's enforced. God knows how it's going to be enforced. I, I do not envy the people that have to deal with that.
Right. Yeah, that's true. But like you say, if it's if Congress is involved with it, then it does have some more oomph behind it than just the NCAA. And I actually do like that idea. I think that forcing the schools to have to commit to okay, if we're going to give you this much in NIL, then you've got to do this and that, and not just show up in one commercial or whatever.
Exactly.
I think that'll help rein things in. But then, like you say, then the revenue sharing aspect becomes the larger piece of the pie that you're enticing players with. So you're still, promising hundreds of thousands or potentially even millions of dollars to your top tier players.
But that money is now coming as a form of direct payment from the university as part of the shared revenue, and different schools are going to do it differently. I don't know how many, but some schools I know are intending to take whatever that chunk of money is that is allocated for their football program and divide it mostly evenly among all the players that are on the 105 roster.
Okay.
Right. And then they're going to maybe give themselves a small percentage of the overall pool of dollars that they have to give to the top end folks, to try to, in an effort to try to keep the peace, to keep everybody on a fairly level playing field. Where other schools, I think Nebraska's in this group, are saying no, that doesn't make any sense. This is a competitive environment, and the left guard is not as important as the left tackle. It just isn't. A punter, unless he's Ray Guy incarnate, is not going to be as valuable to a team as the quarterback. And so those compensations are absolutely going to be very different, and we're okay with that, right?
Right.
So, but how this all gets overseen, and here's the thing: all this started with the idea that before any of this happened, money was being exchanged, but it was being exchanged in brown paper bags and $100 handshakes where boosters were giving individual players thousands of dollars after every game in a bag or whatever, and that's where the term get in his bag comes from, right?
Right.
But if you don't think that underground money isn't going to reemerge after they start creating these rules, then you're naive.
Right. That's true. And then this is just another interesting stat I saw. It said of the first 1,500 FBS scholarship players who entered the portal this go around, 31% are repeat third or fourth time transfers. And that made me think about something you mentioned before, which is just, the whole concept of uprooting your whole life, and moving to some other place and going to a different school. Just from the perspective of a college student, thinking about my own, time in college, it would suck to have to, have 1 year, to start making friendships, at this school and then leave all that behind to go somewhere else entirely and have to, make new friends and all that. Obviously, I get that when there's, hundreds of thousands of dollars involved, it becomes a different story than it was for me as an average college student. But still, you think that can't be healthy for their overall, just college experience and social development.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Well, and think about that. Think about this is becoming. I actually think the women's athletes are ahead in this, in recognizing this, because they're more willing to articulate all of those. You've got the hard part of the decisions. How much money are they getting paid? Where are they in the depth chart? All that sort of stuff. Those are the hard numbers. But then there's all the soft side stuff, which is you're leaving all your best friends. These are guys that you've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours with, working out together, blood, sweat, and tears. They're your brothers, and you're walking out on them. And as much as you want to say, "Oh, it's a business," and you try to be calloused about that, when you're sitting in your dorm room by yourself, 2 months later in the middle of winter, right? Because you transferred schools, you might not feel so strong about that, right? Uh, and you're having to restart over, and that might involve you getting in with the wrong crew, with maybe not as good a group of human beings as you were with before. I mean, there's so many variables in that. And then the academics of it, the school you were at, maybe the new school, you're in the same curricula, but the classes are different. And when you transfer, you lose certain credits, right? Anytime somebody transfers from school to school, not every credit transfers. I mean, it creates all kinds of stress for you, for your family, for your old friends, for your new friends. It's a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And then just one last thing. It also came out just the other day that Penn State's backup quarterback, Bo Pribula, I'm probably butchering that name, but
Yeah.
it's announced that he's going to the transfer portal. Um, and obviously Penn State's playing in the playoffs, and he made a social media post kind of saying that I was kind of put between a rock and a hard place here, wanting to support my team in the playoffs, but then also having to think about my future because the portal window opens right now, right as the new playoff is getting started.
Correct.
So on the one hand, I think he has a good point in that maybe this portal window made sense in the 4-team playoff era, but now, with how things are with this 12-team playoff, maybe we do, wait and open it up after the bowl games are all over. That's a possibility. On the other hand, I would say to this guy, hey, you're the backup quarterback at Penn State. You knew it was going to be competitive there. Allers, I think his name is, the main quarterback there, has gotten hurt this season. I think he's continued to play, but you recall in that Ohio State game that we watched together, we weren't sure if he was going to play at all because he had gotten kind of dinged up in the previous game. So it's not
Right.
like, you've been totally closed out, right? You're one bad play away from being out there and having the chance to play for Penn State and maybe take them, into a championship or whatever. And you're not going to, stick around and try to fight for that. You want to go someplace smaller where you're guaranteed to get a starting job. Once again, I know that with NIL being involved, the money conversations are serious, and if I had to look, getting paid, tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars in one scenario and then much less in another, even if it's in a more prestigious place, that is a conversation you need to have with your family. But it just is disappointing to see how freelance, the college football world is becoming.
Yes, I 100% agree. Um, it's crazy to think about it, right? Like, how does how do you even wrap your head around that?
Right. Like, yeah, I get you're being put in a tough place, but there is always the option of just staying with your team and toughing it out as the backup quarterback. But it's like that wasn't even like an option or something like that.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, is that his point is that if I want to consider what my marketability is, because again, and I'm sure they're hearing this in their ears from both people who are friendly to them and supportive of them and those who are trying to take advantage of them, right? But they're hearing the message that, hey, you know what? When your college years expire, all this NIL shit's gone. Okay? this guy's a backup quarterback at Penn State right now. What would you project if you were to project? What are his chances of being an NFL quarterback?
Right.
As knowing that he is the backup at at Penn State. Well, it's not zero, but it ain't 80% either, right? So he's got an opportunity in this period of 4 years of eligibility to make some real money, like hundreds of thousands of dollars that can pay for all of his college, which he's already getting paid for because he's on scholarship, but to also maybe put some money in a bank account that would allow him to invest in something, or to put the money aside that would allow him to buy a home or to do whatever, right? So I get where these kids feel like an urgency. I've only got 4 years to do this, and most of them are not going to play in the NFL. And if they even are intelligent enough to recognize that that's true, that probably increases their motivation to go out and test the marketplace and maximize what they can maximize. But I'm hopeful that over time, there's going to be enough data out there and research done to prove that the players that stay and then just plug away end up in the long run making more money, or putting themselves in a position to make and leverage and make way more money after college. That's the part that drives me crazy, is that guy is the backup quarterback at Penn State. If he stays the course at Penn State, even if he never becomes the starter, he's still got a degree from Penn State, and he's a former Penn State quarterback. You don't think that has value in the I'm going to call it the LinkedIn marketplace of the rest of your life, right?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's significant.
Well, I just looked it up. So he's a sophomore this year. So he's still got,
Yeah.
several years of eligibility left. So, okay, sure, you're, behind this Allers guy now, but, he's not going to be there forever. So you've got the chance to, get the starting job if you stay the course. But on the other hand, I can see where, kids will say, well, sure, until, the coach brings in some hot shot, 5-star quarterback or a young transfer, who gets the job over me, and I'm not rewarded for my loyalty to my coach for sticking with him for, this time or whatever. Which, once again, I understand where that sentiment is coming from, but at the same time, it's like, hey, it's a competitive atmosphere. You got to prove it on the field then, show that punk freshman that you're better, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's where we're losing this whole concept of meritocracy and competing for your position. And everybody easily is able to acknowledge that concept intellectually when they're in the recruiting process. But then when it comes down to actually competing day in and day out in a collegiate environment, as opposed to most of these kids' experiences in high school where they were the big dog, they were the best player on their team or whatever in high school. Now they're competing with a bunch of people who are as good or better than them, at least initially, and they're being evaluated in every snap, on every day, practice or game, all season. And having that kind of level of scrutiny, that's a very different deal than what high school sports were like.
Yep, that's true. All right, so now we're going to end off the podcast with our predictions for the playoff games that are this weekend. Like you said, we'll be together, so we'll watch some of them together, so that should be fun. We'll start off with Indiana versus Notre Dame. Of course, this one is at Notre Dame, which is in Indiana, so there'll be plenty of fans of both sides there. And as we mentioned, this is a game that hasn't happened in like 30, 40 years. So that's pretty exciting in and of itself. I looked up what the current spread odds were for all these games, and Notre Dame was minus 7.5 favorite, which is generally true for all the games, about a touchdown or so favorite. And this is the one, I think with the other games, I'm probably going to lean towards the favorite, but I think this is the one just because of that atmosphere. Like I said, the fact that it is kind of an interesting rivalry game in a way, in-state rivalry. And the fact that Notre Dame hasn't played the toughest schedule in the world either. I know Indiana hasn't, but neither has Notre Dame. They've looked a little shaky at times this year. So I'm going to go ahead and predict that Indiana comes prepared and inspired, excited that they've made it this far, and that they're going to pull out the win in a bit of a lower scoring game. Um, let's say 27 Indiana to 21 Notre Dame.
Okay, good. I love your analysis. Now, understand that this is a home game for Notre Dame. So the number of Indiana fans that are able to squeak their way into that is almost exclusively predicated, unless there's some requirement that they give a certain number of their tickets away to the opposing team. I would guess that if they have 5,000 fans in that stadium that are, or 8,000 fans at the very most, that are Indiana fans, I'll be shocked, right? And that's a stadium that holds, I don't know, 70,000, maybe 80. So that is going to be a very Notre Dame favored crowd, right? And environment. So yeah, and I agree with you though. I think of all these games, this is the one that is the hardest one to really analyze because of the schedules the teams have played. And I like your pick actually, but I'll go the opposite way just for the sake of our conversation. I would agree that it's going to be somewhat of a lower scoring game. I do believe that to be true. I really like Indiana, but since you picked that, I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to do Notre Dame is going to leverage their home field and their home game atmosphere, and they're going to end up winning this game with maybe a slightly lower scoring game. I'm going to say it's going to be 24-17 because I think the weather's going to suck.
When I was just looking this up to find details and I couldn't, but I did see something about how the rules for this first round of the playoff are different than a normal home game. Someone was comparing them actually to the rules in volleyball. In the volleyball tournament, where like the opposing team, like they get to have like a video played, like when their players come out on the field, and
Right.
like there are certain rules for like them getting to play their fight song and things of that nature.
Yep.
I don't know how that
Right.
goes into ticket allotment, but
So they get to have room for their band. Now they might be able to do that by providing chairs around the perimeter of the stadium and not in the stadium. You know what I mean? Like on the field, but just a place for them to sit,
right,
or something like that. But yeah, I mean, if it's anything like a Nebraska stadium, for example, Alex, I mean, those are mostly season ticket holders.
right.
I don't know. I don't know how you tell these season ticket holders, your seats that you've sat in all season, they don't count for this game, even though it's a home game. Maybe they do. Maybe they do that, and it'll allow more Indiana fans in.
Right.
That's probably something we could talk about in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I did see that the prices for those Indiana Notre Dame games are pretty high. So if you do have a ticket as a Notre Dame fan, you might be tempted to sell it just to get a nice buck.
Make money.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a bad idea.
Now, then we have SMU versus Penn State. Obviously, we're just talking about Penn State. So if their quarterback gets hurt, they might be in trouble because they'll have to go to their third string guy. But presuming that doesn't happen, and even though SMU is obviously kind of the Cinderella team that made it in to this into this playoff, and I would actually be excited if SMU did win. I think I'm going to predict that Penn State closes the one out. They played well against Ohio State. Or not Ohio State, Oregon in the Big Ten championship game, and showed off what they could do. So I think they will beat SMU. Let's say 35 Penn State to 21 SMU.
Okay, I'm going to agree with you in this one. I think Penn State is also the better team. Although I was impressed by SMU's comeback in that Clemson game. But I just don't think as highly of the ACC collectively as I do what I think of the top end of the Big Ten. So I am going, and it's at Penn State. I mean, you know what the weather's going to be like in Happy Valley? Oh, God, I just can't imagine. I mean, I haven't looked at the weather reports, but I'm going to predict the Penn State victory. But again, I am going to say that it's going to be an uglier, lower scoring game. and I'm going to go with your 27-21 score with a Penn State victory.
Yeah, I should say they're minus 8.5 favorites, Penn State.
Okay.
And then we've got Clemson versus Texas. Texas is 11.5 favorites. They've got a little bit more of a spread according to Vegas.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and even though Clemson is the SEC or the ACC champion, obviously they're coming in with kind of a number of losses on their schedule that they weren't planning for, but they're playing better at the end of their year. And Texas kind of played an ugly game against Georgia.
Right.
So that might show some vulnerability. But at the end of the day, I got to think that Texas's sheer talent is going to win out. And also that one is at Texas, so they will obviously have a big home field advantage there. So I'm going to say that Texas wins, but I think Clemson will keep it closer than the spread. So let's say that Texas wins 31-28 over Clemson.
Okay. I'm going to agree that Texas wins. I think it's going to be a bigger blowout. I think it's going to be 45 Texas to 17 Clemson.
Oof. All right. And then last one, and perhaps the most interesting game because it's the two closest seeded teams, Ohio State versus Tennessee. Obviously, Ohio State is the favorite. They're -7 on the spread, and it is a home game for them. So on the one hand, Ohio State overall has looked to be the better team this year. These are the two third-ranked teams in the SEC and the Big Ten playing against each other. So it's a home game for Ohio State. The weather, once again, will probably be crappy, which will favor them because Tennessee certainly is not used to that kind of weather. But my one hesitation in choosing Ohio State is that the Michigan loss is still stinging, I'm sure, in both the players' minds and many of the fans. And I already saw something about how apparently Ohio State fans are selling their tickets to Tennessee fans. So it sounds like Tennessee will have a solid presence in that stadium. So that will be interesting to see. But what do you think of that? Do you think the hangover from the Michigan game is a factor here?
Oh, definitely a factor. Oh, definitely. I would be shocked if it wasn't. And I wish I had watched more Tennessee football this year. I really have to admit that I haven't watched very many of Tennessee's games, so I know so little about them. I know that they had some tremendous success early, but then they kind of went into a slump, and I don't know how they performed late in the year, whether they pulled out of that or not, and I know Ohio State is extremely talented, but they just need to be coached better. I think they lost a Michigan game on the sidelines more than on the field. I think that Ohio State's coaches played into the hands of Michigan and allowed Michigan to dictate that game, and they just weren't as tough. They weren't as physical or as tough as Michigan was, and so I'm concerned about Ohio State's psyche.
Right.
So,
well, I did see on one podcast I was listening to about the Ohio State-Michigan game, they were making the point that, and I guess Ryan Day had maybe said this in the lead up to the game, basically that they were going to physically manhandle Michigan the way that Michigan has kind of manhandled them in some of the recent games. And so they kind of went with more of a running focus than they usually do, and that didn't necessarily work for them. So that kind of backfired. So I think if Ohio State goes back to their bread and butter of what they're good at, then I think their offense will probably click better, you would think.
Yes. Well, and remember, there was lots of turnovers in that Michigan Ohio State game. Just crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And so, you hope that you're not going to have a repeat of that if you're Ohio State. But the thing is Tennessee is a very talented team, has a very talented quarterback who's been, I think, kind of up and down. He's had some games that he looked like the Heisman Trophy winner, and then other games where he looked terrible. So which of him is going to show up? Which version of him shows up?
Yeah. Well, I did look at Tennessee's schedule. So they lost to Georgia near the end of the year, but then beat UTEP and Vanderbilt. So that's how they ended their year. And then they beat Alabama, obviously, earlier in the year.
Yeah.
Had an overtime win over Florida, and then lost to Arkansas. Also a 25-15 win over Oklahoma. So you look at that, and it's like, okay, they beat Oklahoma, sure, they beat Alabama, they beat Kentucky, but none of them by like crazy big scores, and all of those teams, weren't necessarily world beaters, right? We know that Alabama was down this year compared to their usual standard. So I'm going to stick with my gut and say that Ohio State still wins, with all the advantages that they have, and that, the Michigan hangover could be a problem for them, or they come out playing pissed off that they underperformed against Michigan, and that actually helps them. You never know how those things will go. So I'm going to go ahead and say that they win. Maybe a little lower scoring, like you say, because of the weather. So let's say it's 27 Ohio State to 17 Tennessee.
Okay, I'm going to be in general agreement with you and say Ohio State's going to win this game, but I think Ohio State's going to win it more comfortably. I'm going to say that it's going to be 35-21.
All right. Well, so we generally agree, except for the Indiana Notre Dame game. That's the one where we diverged.
I'm since that one is such a I don't know kind of game, I figured I would go opposite of you. But I'm kind of rooting for Indiana. I got to admit.
Oh yeah,
that my preference would be that Indiana wins that game.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. In an ideal world for me, I would like to have Indiana, SMU, Clemson, and Ohio State win. I guess that would be my ideal scenario.
Yep. Well, and so that'll be another thing for us to talk about, and we, all kinds of people have weighed in on that, including a lot of national pundits, about how this setup, which I'm sure was a compromise setup. We've talked about it before. The only way we got the group of five and these quote lesser Power Four conferences, ACC and Big 12, to agree to this whole setup was to get some guarantees that their champion would always get in, that the loser of their championship game would be given somewhat of a preferential treatment, and that they would get the automatic bye. I think the reaction now that people have seen the lineups and they've seen that, Oregon, who, by all intent and purposes has had the best season up till now, undefeated, and Big Ten champions. What do they get for having had this great season? Their path is harder than some of the lesser teams because of how that all shook out in the matchups, right? And so the argument could be made that that's not right.
Right. Yep. We talked about that on the last podcast. One last thing I did just think of, for the teams that played in the conference championship games, so that would be SMU, Clemson, Penn State, and Texas, who ironically are playing against each other, I guess. So maybe the argument won't really be tested this year. But those teams all are just coming off of 2 weeks, right, from their previous game, whereas the other teams all had 3 weeks because they didn't play in the conference championship game. So, like I say, because ironically those teams play each other, I guess it kind of washes out. But I'd be curious to see in future years if you had a conference championship loser versus a third best team, who didn't play in a conference championship game at all. Does that extra week of preparing, of getting healed up, of not having to get beaten up in a game, does that become a factor?
See, I think the opposite would be more likely.
Oh, yeah?
That 3 weeks is too long. Hell, 2 weeks can seem like forever within a season, right? When you're playing a game every week and then all of a sudden you have a week where you don't have a game, that 2 weeks seems to drag on. It can easily get you disconnected, right? Even though you're getting healthy and stuff, right? You're avoiding the collisions of a football game. But to do that and have 3 weeks, that's almost like you're heading into your off season, and you're all the bruises and stuff that you're used to just having all the time, and you just kind of get used to it. You just get used to being sore, right? But now after 3 weeks, some of that stuff is actually healed enough that then when you get hit again, that pain comes back and
Right.
it's
Well,
more sensitive.
I know that's something that Tom Osborne talked about back in the day in terms of keeping the team focused for the bowl game was a bit of a
Yeah,
challenge for him. But,
right,
that's the next round, right? So the next round is on the traditional, January 1st weekend. So
right.
like, your Oregons and your Georgias who got the bye, they're having to
Right.
wait even longer, right? But that's quote unquote normal because that's typically when the big New Year's
Well,
Six games would happen, anyways. Um,
except that you're going to be playing a team that played just a week and a half before. Right. I would rather have had a game in the middle of that than have 3 or 4 weeks off. In the past, when they had those bowl games, oftentimes neither team played their best football, right? That it was very rare that you would have a team that would look like they hadn't missed a beat,
I
right?
don't
That
know.
they would have to come up and do that.
At least for like the major games, like for, in the 14 playoff, like in those playoff games, I'd say it'd be like 50-50. Sometimes you would see that where they would underperform, but other times you'd see them come in really sharp, and you'd get really, really nice
Yeah.
football and one team might dominate the other.
Well, and again, I think that goes back to how those teams prepared. Some teams would choose to take some time off to give guys a chance to heal their bumps and bruises and bring them back fresh, and then other teams would keep playing hard. Tom Osborne's philosophy, after early in his career, he would do the give guys a break and let them heal. He changed, flipped completely, and he would run them as hard as regular season. They wouldn't take any break off. Like I remember in the '94 national championship season, I don't think they took but 2 days off, and they were right back to practicing. Because back then, I don't think there were any rules about, it used to be, now there are rules, like even for the Nebraska pinstripe, uh, at most you can have 15 practices.
Right.
They don't let you have more than that. So you have to kind of schedule it out based on whenever you're going to play, um, so that you prep as best you can. And that's just different than the 5 practices a week that you're used to having.
Right. But to your point, if you're right, then not only is Oregon maybe having a tougher potential opponent than some of the other bye schools or other schools or whatever, but the fact that
Right.
they do have the bye at all and have 4 weeks off or whatever versus
Yeah.
playing against a team that just played 2 weeks ago is
Exactly.
is a disadvantage in and of itself, and the bye isn't actually helpful.
No, exactly. I would agree. I think that they're going to find that out.
Right.
I really do.
But you have to have the bye if you're going to have 12 teams because you can't
Oh, I
play any other way.
I totally get that. I totally get that. But so then it becomes a thing of how you manage that, right? So if I'm Oregon, for example, I might very well run a full blown, full contact scrimmage with my team this weekend, same time frame as these guys, right?
Right.
With the risk of injuring somebody. I mean, 100 plays. I mean, full blown, like a spring game, right? Like a Nebraska spring game, right? And we have regularly lost 1 or 2 players for the season
Yeah.
in that spring game, right? But running that kind of full contact, full blown football, maybe you could avoid kicking game, right? And just and do kicking game practice as you normally would, but not have it integrated into your scrimmage, but actually do offense and defense and special teams scrimmage, um, and really get your guys banging around, right? Be very physical, very, very physical practice, risking injury to do so, just so your guys stay ready. And maybe that's the right approach, and maybe coaches will figure that out over time. That's what they have to do to make sure that their guys are ready to execute at a high level when they actually finally play. Or maybe they're going to find that giving them a break is the way to go. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know which one's better. They're going to
Right.
have to figure it out, and only time will tell.
Well, especially since because right, even with the 4-team playoff, right, you'd have that month break, but then you play one game, and then if you
Yep.
advance, you play one more. Now
Yeah.
you're looking at playing 3, right? If you
Right.
keep going,
Even the bye is 3, right?
right,
Like Oregon's going to play, and then they're going to play again, and then they're going to play again. So they're going to have 3 games. And if you're one of these teams that doesn't get the bye, you'll have to play 4 games.
right. Which, and if you're
Crazy.
Texas, say, and so you played, okay,
Yeah.
2 weeks before this, you played a conference championship game, tough, and you lost. Then you play a first round, and then 3 more games after that. I mean, that's just a lot of football.
That's right. That's right. And again, if you think about it, like, and maybe Texas has a better strength and conditioning and all kinds of things like that. I don't know, but you look at Nebraska as a comparator. I mean, on average, you lose about a player every week or 2, right? I mean, a real player, like a starter. You lose a player every week in your top 44. At least one player out of your top 44 players goes down and it becomes unavailable because of that game, right? I would say that that's true. At least one. And so when you start doing the math, you got to play 4 games. By the time you get to the championship, you might be down 5 or 6 players that would otherwise be starting in that game, if it weren't for their injuries or whatever. And so that's where the bye becomes valuable, is just in the diminished wear and tear. But how do you manage that so that you don't show up at the game and the other team's firing on all cylinders and playing 100 miles an hour, and it takes you the first quarter and a half to kind of get back up to speed,
Right.
because you've been off for so long.
Yeah, because you've got, you also have the advantage of players coming back from injury, right, to maybe fill in those
Yep.
spots for new players that do get injured.
Exactly.
but-
Exactly. That's true. There's just all kinds of crazy stuff that these guys are going to figure out.
As all you listeners out there can tell, we could keep yapping about college football for another hour here, but we'll let you go here and wrap up for this episode. We'll be coming back with an update on how these playoff games went and predicting Nebraska versus Boston College. Hopefully, we'll also be talking about our championship winning Nebraska volleyball team. Wouldn't that be nice?
That would be one heck of a way to have the conversation.
All right. So if you out there enjoyed listening to this podcast, you can email us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can also reach us if you search for us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can search for College Football Throwdown there. You can leave us a rating or review. We always love hearing feedback from the fans. So thank you out there for listening, and thank you, Dad, for joining me for this episode. Until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.